3 true folklore horror stories. The strange experience at Grandma's house. In a quiet little village, time seemed to have frozen in the late 20th century. The people here led simple and unadorned lives, taking care of one another, and although their days were plain, they were filled with warmth. However, this seemingly ordinary village was the setting or a chilling event during that particular time. The story's protagonist is a child from a distant aunt's family. Aunt's family lived in a more remote rural area, where transportation was inconvenient and medical conditions were very limited. The child, once a lively and cheerful little one, suddenly fell gravely ill. Aunt was frantic but helpless. In that harsh environment, they could only hope or some folk remedies to alleviate the child's condition, but the child's state continued to worsen. In desperation, Aunt decided to carry the child to the town where the narrator's family lived. The town had a clinic and private medical offices, and perhaps the doctors there could save the child. Aunt carried the child on her back, traversing a long and arduous journey, until they finally arrived at the town. By the time they reached the narrator's house, the child was so weak that he appeared unrecognizable, his face pale, and breathing faint. The narrator's family was heartbroken upon seeing Aunt and the child's condition. They quickly took the child to the town's clinic. However, after examining the child, the doctor regretfully shook his head, stating that the child had come too late, and was beyond saving. This news was like a bolt from the blue, causing Aunt to collapse in despair. She pleaded with the doctor to save the child, but the doctor could do nothing. That afternoon, the child passed away on the narrator's family's bed. Aunt was devastated, holding the child's lifeless body and weeping for a long, long time. The narrator's family also silently shed tears, mourning for the poor child. Aunt, heartbroken, left with her family, leaving the child's body behind at the narrator's house. The narrator's father felt it was right to return the child to Aunt's home, so that he could rest in his own hometown. Thus, one person set out to walk the over 30 kilometers back to Aunt's house, carrying the deceased child, through the night. It was a pitch-black night, without moon or stars. The father walked along the rugged mountain path, the surroundings eerily silent, with only the sound of his footsteps, and heavy breathing filling the air. His heart was heavy. Why, with sorrow and fear, but he knew this was something he had to do. As he walked, the father suddenly sensed something strange behind him. He heard a faint noise, as if some dirt or sand was being scattered behind him. He paused and looked back, but saw nothing. Thinking he had he continued on his way. However, the sound occurred again, growing clearer and more persistent. The father began to feel scared, and quickened his pace, but the sound kept following him. This continued throughout the journey. That mysterious sound seemed to be his shadow. The father's heart raced, and he couldn't understand what was happening. He started to doubt if something sinister was following him, but he dared not dwell on it, pushing forward with trepidation. Finally, after much hardship, the father reached Aunt's house. He handed the child's body to her and wearily returned home. However, the terrifying night did not end there. At home, the narrator's mother and older sister were settling in for the night. The sister, only 2 or 3 years old, had just blown out the kerosene lamp. When she began to cry, "Mom, there's a little person on the bed," she exclaimed. When the mother lit the lamp and asked where the little person was, the sister pointed to the bed. The mother searched around but found nothing. Yet the sister continued to cry, insisting that the little person was right there. Feeling frightened, the mother was puzzled as to why her daughter could see something that wasn't there. Remembering the father's late-night return, a chill crept over her. She sensed that something was amiss. The next day, the mother took the sister to see the village elders, hoping they could provide guidance. After hearing the mother's tale, the elders were intrigued. They speculated that perhaps the child's spirit had returned, or some unclean entity had followed the father back home. Frightened by the elders' words, the mother wondered how to comfort her daughter, and restore peace to their home. Finally, someone suggested calling a local shaman to investigate the matter. The shaman arrived and surveyed the house. He closed his eyes and muttered incantations, then suddenly opened them, declaring that the little ghost's heart had landed in their home. The mother turned pale at his words, confused about why the little ghost's heart would be in their house, and unsure of what to do. The shaman led the mother and narrator to the spot beneath the bed where the child had died and began to dig. After digging over a foot deep, they uncovered a heart-shaped patch of fresh blood. The shaman carefully extracted the blood and performed a series of rituals, claiming this would allow the little ghost's spirit to rest and stop haunting their home. After the shaman's intervention, the sister indeed stopped crying at night, and the home returned to a state of tranquility. Yet that terrifying night remained forever etched in the memory of the narrator's family. They never understood the source of that mysterious sound, or why the sister saw the little person, but they knew some things could not be explained by science. Years later, the narrator would recall this incident with lingering trepidation. He remained uncertain about what truly happened that night, yet he believed there were many unknowns in this world waiting for exploration. The seventh night return of Aunt Me's daughter. In a remote little town, there lived an ordinary woman named Aunt Mei. Aunt Mei's life was fraught with hardship. Her husband had passed away unexpectedly, leaving her to raise her teenage daughter, Chin, and her young son alone. The weight of life's burdens fell entirely on Aunt Mei's shoulders, but she never complained, quietly working hard to provide a good life for her children. Chin was in her rebellious teenage years, filled with curiosity and dissatisfaction with the world. She often hung out with local delinquents. Skipping classes had become a regular occurrence. Aunt Mei worried deeply about her daughter, repeatedly urging Chin to study hard and avoid bad company, but Chin refused to listen. She felt her mother didn't understand her and was always restricting her freedom. In Chin's third year of middle school, Aunt Mei's fears became a grim reality. One day, Chin's teacher informed Aunt Mei that Chin had not attended school. Panic-stricken, Aunt Mei searched everywhere for her daughter but found no clues. She visited Chin's usual hangouts and asked her friends, but no one knew where Chin had gone. 5 days passed, and there was still no sign of Chin. Aunt Mei's anxiety escalated. She quickly reported her daughter missing and enlisted the villagers to help search. They scoured the town and surrounding areas for a long time, but Chin's whereabouts remained a mystery. Aunt Mei was filled with despair, not knowing what had happened to her daughter. Eventually, on the mountaintop behind the village, people discovered Chin's body. She was already starting to decompose, completely naked, with marks around her neck, and only one shoe on her foot. The sight shocked and saddened everyone. Upon seeing her daughter's lifeless body, Aunt Mei fainted. She could not accept this cruel reality. Her world shattered in an instant. After Chin was buried, Aunt Mei fell into profound grief. She spent her days in tears, unable to move past the loss of her daughter. However, on the seventh night after Chin's burial, something even more terrifying occurred. That night, a torrential rainstorm struck the village. The wind howled, thunder roared, and lightning illuminated the sky, enveloping the village in a terrifying atmosphere. Alone at home, Aunt Mei longed for Chin. Suddenly, she heard a sobbing sound, piercing and sorrowful, as if coming from a great distance. At first, Aunt Mei thought it was just her imagination, but the crying grew clearer. Listening intently, she realized it was coming from the direction of the mountain. Her heart raced. She had no idea what was happening. The crying grew closer, eventually reaching Aunt Mei's doorstep. She heard knocking and then Chin's voice calling from outside the window, "Mama, open the door. Mama, open the door. I am so cold." Through the flashes of lightning, Aunt Mei could distinctly see Chin's figure standing outside. Trembling with fear, Aunt Mei could hardly believe her eyes. She didn't understand how Chin had returned, or if this was truly her daughter. Paralyzed by terror, she curled up on the bed, crying. The crying and knocking continued for a long time before slowly fading away. Aunt Mei endured a long, fearful night. The next day, she shared her experience with the villagers, who were equally shocked and frightened, unsure how to explain what had happened. Some suggested it was Chin's spirit returning on the seventh night to check on Aunt Mei and her brother. Others believed something sinister was at play. Regardless, this incident instilled deep fear in Aunt Mei and the entire village. From that point on, Aunt Mei's life grew even more challenging. She not only had to bear the pain of losing her daughter, but also face the terror of that horrific night. Yet, she did not give up. She remained strong for her son and for herself. The mysterious footsteps. On the edge of a bustling city, there was a university. Surrounding the school were many private houses rented out to students, and I was one of the tenants. I was a diligent student, who, after living in the noisy dormitory for a while, found it disruptive to my studies. So, I decided to rent a private room to better focus on my academics. After a long search, I finally found a satisfactory place. The landlord was an elderly man with poor hearing, living on the first floor, while my boyfriend and I lived on the second. The house was old but relatively clean and tidy. After moving in, my boyfriend and I started our new life together. We studied, cooked, and enjoyed our time. Everything seemed normal until that terrifying night arrived. One night, after turning off the lights and going to bed, we suddenly heard rhythmic footsteps. Step by step, the sounds approached, then retreated, wandering around our bedroom. My boyfriend and I were jolted awake by the unexpected noise. We were so frightened that we couldn't breathe, afraid to turn on the lights or speak, huddled under the covers, listening to the eerie footsteps. The footsteps alternated between clear and muffled, as if someone were pacing in our room. My heart raced. I had no idea what was happening. I wondered if a thief had broken in, but dismissed the idea since we had locked the doors and windows before sleeping. My boyfriend was equally scared, holding me tightly in an attempt to provide some comfort. Yet, we both knew this fear would not easily dissipate. We trembled under the blankets, unsure of what to do. The footsteps continued for a long time, sometimes pausing at the bedside before moving on. My boyfriend and I felt we were on the brink of a breakdown, not knowing when the mysterious sounds would cease. We started to suspect that something unclean resided in the house. But we dared not dwell on that thought. Eventually, we unknowingly drifted off to sleep. The next morning, everything seemed normal. We checked our room but found nothing unusual. However, the terrifying night lingered in our minds. My boyfriend and I began to wonder if we had experienced a nightmare, yet we distinctly remembered the footsteps being so real. We didn't want to stay in the house any longer, but had no idea where to go. We decided to speak with the landlord to see if he had any insights. After hearing our account, the landlord found it strange. He said he had never heard any footsteps, and had no idea what it could be. He suggested we observe the situation for a while longer, and could move out if the issue persisted. Reluctantly, my boyfriend and I continued living in the house. However, we remained on edge every day, fearful that the footsteps would return. We explored various explanations, wondering if the sounds were coming from next door, or if the house's structure caused sound reflections. Yet, we never found a satisfactory answer. As time passed, the footsteps did not reappear. My boyfriend and I gradually relaxed our vigilance, believing that the terrifying night was merely a random event. Little did we know, the mysterious footsteps concealed an unknown secret. One day, while tidying up the room, I discovered an old diary. The diary belonged to a girl who had once lived in the same room. In it, she recorded her strange experiences, including the eerie footsteps. I read the diary carefully and found that this girl had also been troubled by the same footsteps. She tried various methods to resolve the issue but ultimately failed. In the end, unable to endure the fear, she moved out of the house. After reading the diary, I was filled with dread. I didn't understand what the footsteps were or what to do about them. I decided to share my findings with my boyfriend so we could discuss our next steps. My boyfriend was equally shocked upon hearing my story. We resolved to inform the landlord again to see if he knew about the diary. Upon hearing us, the landlord's expression darkened. He remained silent for a long time, before slowly recounting a shocking tale. It turned out that a tragedy had occurred in the house. A girl had committed suicide in that room over a romantic issue. Since then, people had often reported hearing the strange footsteps. The landlord had refrained from disclosing this information to tenants, not wanting to instill fear or affect the rental prospects. Filled with terror after hearing the landlord's story, my boyfriend and I decided to leave the house immediately and never return. We packed our belongings and hurriedly left the place filled with horrifying memories. From that day on, my boyfriend and I never heard those eerie footsteps again. Yet, the haunting experience remained etched in our hearts, an unforgettable memory that we could never shake off.